Rolling forecasts.
We'll be looking at a series of budgeting alternatives over the next few lessons. You can adopt these in place of traditional budgeting or add aspects of them to your current budgeting process. In this lesson, I'll explain rolling forecasts, their pros and cons, and which companies may benefit most from them.
You're 6 months into your year. Every budget to actual report is a litany of variances that show your company lacks the gift of prophecy. Things are not turning out like you budgeted 6 months ago. There have been some big surprises in the economy and from your competitors. Internal project timelines have changed. And yet, staff are continuing to spend their budget allocations as planned. Some sales staff are assured of hitting their budget target and are now coasting. They may even be shifting sales into next year. Many people aren't thinking about your current business environment's financial implications until the next budgeting cycle that starts in a few months. The scenario I just described is why some companies have switched to rolling budgets. Rolling budgets are known as rolling forecasts and continuous budgeting. Some may say each is slightly different, but I'll use the phrases interchangeably in this lesson. For some people, continuous budgeting may be too traumatic a term to use, especially when trying to convince others to switch to this method. If you get through the budget season by telling yourself the pain will someday be over, what hope do you have when budgeting becomes continuous? I'll be comparing a completely static annual budget to rolling budgets for simplification. In practice, companies can choose from a spectrum where one end of the spectrum is sticking to a completely static budget with no changes, and the other end of the spectrum is reforecasting all amounts every month or quarter. Some of the companies at this end of the spectrum don't create a traditional budget, they are constantly planning from rolling forecasts. A popular hybrid approach is to create a budget at the beginning of the fiscal year and then re-budget halfway through the year with an updated forecast. Many companies take some ideas or processes from rolling budgets to improve a completely static budgeting process. Some challenges to static budgeting can also be addressed via improved management, communication, and compensation systems. Rolling budgets don't have to entail changes to everything in every forecast cycle. Senior leaders could decide to have departments change their current budgets very little or very much. The amount of change can be different for each cycle. Sometimes, little has changed in the business environment from the prior period, so change is just disruptive. Other times, the company must make drastic changes to adapt to the business environment. Are a budget and a forecast the same thing? Let's revisit the AICPA's definition of a forecast. A forecast is based on the responsible party's assumptions reflecting the conditions it expects to exist and the course of action it expects to take. This sounds conceptually like what we want in a budget, but budgets are heavily influenced by company politics. Budget targets are compromises, especially if they are used to set incentive compensation payouts. Companies must decouple compensation from the forecasts to improve accuracy. This prevents much of the gamesmanship in budgeting. Sometimes, budgets are aspirational. This can occur with a visionary CEO or board that wants to stretch the company. Forecasts may not factor in the stretch goals. The budgeting process includes many people and compiles large amounts of detailed information. Fewer people work together on a forecast, and the data is often at a much higher level. Forecasts created soon after a full budgeting process may be strongly influenced by the budget. Over time, trend lines and new analyses replace the budget assumptions. A rolling forecast is one that's updated periodically. Popular update frequencies are monthly or quarterly. For example, a forecast developed in December would be for January through December of the following year. Then in March, a forecast would be developed for April of that year to March of the following year. Each quarter, a new forecast is made for 12 months into the future. The decision to update a forecast may be event driven rather than on a time schedule. For example, a significant business environment change or an internal change could trigger a reforecast. Any change to a major assumption in a current forecast should trigger a reforecast. The forecast is developed by a smaller group of people than a large annual budgeting process. Not all line items or centers may be analyzed and updated. You may decide to only update significant items or update items on a rotating basis. Often, the forecast is for a constant period into the future. Forecasts are often done for 1 to 2 years into the future, depending on how much change is anticipated in forecast assumptions. Longer forecasts can be made if little change is expected in the business environment, internal operations, or business strategy. The rolling forecast could just be for the remainder of the year to anticipate annual performance. This is useful for accruing expected bonuses, profit share, or incentive compensation. New forecasts can be anything from small changes to the last forecast to a major reforecast of almost everything. Here are some options. Trend analysis. This is the simplest way to forecast. Past trend lines are just extrapolated into the future. The forecast does not reflect current or future items that could cause future results to deviate from past trends. Projections and forecasting. A full reforecast would reassess all major assumptions from the past forecast. The forecast includes all new knowledge and strategies that were unknown at the time of the last forecast. Alternate projections may be made to decide which is the most likely to occur and be used as the forecast. Budget adjusted for expected large variances. A company may decide to only update items from the last budget or forecast that are widely deviating from current performance. The goal isn't to make the forecast match current performance more closely. Instead, management can assess what's driving current performance, what they want to change to improve performance, and how that will change future performance. The forecast would then start with current performance and then show improving performance over time in the forecast. If business conditions have significantly worsened since the last forecast, the reforecast may show worsening performance. The forecast should show better performance than a projection of company performance if management took no action. Hybrid of detailed and summary forecasts. Some companies prepare a detailed forecast for the near term and a high level forecast for periods further into the future. For example, a company could prepare a detailed monthly forecast for the next quarter, followed by a more summarized forecast for the next 3 quarters after that. This pairs detailed planning for operational decisions with longer term considerations for strategic planning. I've also used this hybrid approach for cash flow planning. Near term cash flows are much easier to estimate than cash flows further into the future. Should budget to actual reporting continue to be based on the original annual budget? Or should the budget amounts be updated with the new forecast amounts? Different companies choose different answers to this. Some companies do not change the budget in the accounting system throughout the year. This choice fits companies that base incentive compensation on the budgeted targets set at the beginning of the year. These companies may still prepare forecasts for their current planning. Forecasts replace the budget in management meetings and are used for decision making. Other companies update the budget amounts in their accounting system with the most recent forecast. To do this, the forecast should have a level of detail similar to the budget it's replacing. For example, a forecast may need to be developed for each expense line item for each department, but the level of analysis done in the forecast may be less than the budget. If a company decides to re-budget mid-year, the budget amounts for July to December may be from the re-budget and not the original budget. A company that does quarterly forecasting may update its budget amounts every quarter. January to March variances are based on the original budget or a forecast done by the start of January. April to June variances are based on an April to June forecast that's done by the start of April. In this quarterly example, the year to date sum of the variances at year end are a collection of different forecasts against actual results. It's like the annual budget was built via 4 forecasts over the year. There are many benefits to doing rolling forecasts in addition to traditional budgets or in place of traditional budgets. Constantly looking further into the future. The budget ends at a fixed point in the future. The number of months left in the budget gets shorter each month during the year. This can cause the short term focus I described at the start of this lesson. People may be only thinking about what they need to do to hit their desired performance for this budget year instead of constantly improving performance. If this has been a good year, they may even push some sales into the next budget year to get a head start on their incentive compensation for next year. Rolling forecasts promote continuous improvement. However, rolling forecasts could cause a shorter term focus, which I'll cover later. Forecasting forces a reassessment of the business environment. Some managers are focused on internal operations and only think more strategically during budgeting and forecasting. The forecast helps these managers identify and prepare for opportunities and challenges as they emerge. Updated information is constantly being gathered and integrated into financial planning. Budgeting forces prioritization of projects to allocate scarce resources. Priorities may change during the year. Forecasting helps identify this and facilitates resource allocation to match the updated prioritization. Revenues and expenses are often managed independently of each other throughout the year. Revenues are very hard to accurately forecast. That budget is sent to salespeople. Expenses are much easier to forecast. Those budgets are sent to many different cost centers, teams, or departments. Behaviorally, those cost centers see their budget allocation as their right the minute the budget is approved. Taking that pot of money away later is hard. It's perceived as a breach of contract. What happens when revenues run below budget? Some companies don't try to tell cost centers to delay or cut expenses, causing profits to dip. Rolling forecasts create the opportunity to adjust expense allocations to match the updated revenue projections. Cash flow planning is often done at a detailed level for short periods of time. Continually updated, accurate forecasts can be used for cash flow planning. Constantly updated rolling projections can be used for higher level strategic cash flow planning, more meaningful variance reporting. When variance amounts replace budget amounts in accounting systems, there is less variance reporting using long past inaccurate guesses. Variances based on outdated information create noise that's eventually ignored by readers of budget reports. Those report users may also be ignoring other important information that's still in the reports. The improved relevance of the budget variance reports maintains their effectiveness for financial management. Managers stay in the habit of reading the reports throughout the year, can make changes when the company is ready. It takes time for businesses to perceive, acknowledge, and act upon changes in the business environment. There is a lag between when the environment changes and when businesses are emotionally or operationally ready to respond. The business environment change may need to reach a certain level before a company is willing to deal with it. Frequent forecasting cycles help management through the perception phase. Each cycle is an opportunity to enact a strategy that may be long overdue. Rolling forecasts have many benefits, but they won't solve all your problems. They may create some new challenges for you. Here are some challenges you may face. If a budget is updated every quarter, how much effort will managers put into their projections for months 4 through 12? Will detailed 12-month planning disappear under rolling budgets? I know one company that switched to rolling budgets and found that managers kept looking only 3 months into the future because they knew they could replace their projections for months 4 through 12 at the next quarterly reforecast. The quality of the projections for months 4 through 12 may decrease under rolling budgets. The projection horizon may cause managers to always be focused on short term results rather than long term strategic planning. Many companies base incentive compensation and annual key performance indicators, KPIs, on the annual budget. A great deal of negotiation goes into setting the targets for both. Should these targets be renegotiated and reset every quarter with the updated forecast? Some companies will stick with their original targets for the year. Others may move to a performance management system built more for frequent cycles, like objectives and key results, also known as OKRs. Some companies may switch from basing compensation on budget targets to profit sharing plans or other factors. It may be more resource intensive. Adding rolling forecasts to the grueling budget season may push managers past their financial analysis limit. That's one reason why a company may replace budgeting with rolling forecasts. Rolling forecasts require more flexible planning and reporting systems than budgeting. For example, will accounting staff put the new budgets into the current accounting software for every update of the forecast? Frequent forecasts require more finance staff time for gathering info, running numbers, reporting, and communicating forecasts. Implementing rolling forecasts also require a large amount of training. It might cause the forecast to be finance generated. Setting an annual budget is often performed with broad representation from throughout the company. Rapid, repeated cycles may preclude having large groups of people involved in forecasting. This can be mitigated by good information flow up and down across the company, so those setting forecasts can represent those who are not present for forecast discussions. More accurate forecasts may come at the expense of other analysis. Limited financial analysis time is focused on repeated forecasts rather than more scenarios, sensitivity analysis, and projections. It may also take away from strategic planning and profitability analysis. Your company may not be culturally ready. Some managers and staff aren't culturally comfortable with constant change. Static budgets give the impression that much can be fixed for months at a time. Many have gotten used to managing a budget allocation carefully over those months. Some people will find it hard to make long term plans for their departments when they feel their budgets are constantly in flux. Rolling forecasts are more appropriate for some types of companies in some situations, including rapidly changing companies such as startups and early stage companies, companies going through a restructure, or companies in dynamic business environments, companies facing large uncertainty about the future. Larger companies with a small group of people from across the company tasked with forecasting, companies with good processes for information flow up and down across the company, companies using rapid cycle goal setting like OKRs, companies that don't need annual budgets for compensation or company performance evaluation, companies that have clearly identified the drivers of their performance, companies culturally comfortable with constant change.